What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't your situation, but your fear? Tune in today's podcast as we dive into fear and anxiety and how to stop letting them control your life. Welcome to the Stoke Nation podcast. Hello everybody, I'm Chris Ray, and some of you that have already been subscribed to the channel, everything has been based on me trying to catch the biggest wave of my life. However, I have been a little bit on the MIA recently. I haven't really posted anything for the past couple months, and there's been a reason for it. I've been completely, busy with just life in general, but as owning a business and with the spring here and almost summer, my primary focus has been, my surf school and the surf business in general, and obviously doing some traveling and whatnot. And however, I am super excited to be introducing to you guys the new Stoke Nation podcast that I will be really digging in more and sharing with you guys more. We're going to be having some guests in the future, so I've been working on that, and I'm really excited to be sharing this whole entire new journey with you guys and really just talk about surfing in the big wave community and really helping you elevate yourself and with whatever it is that you're wanting to level up in, whether it is big wave surfing, whether it is just surfing in general. And so I'm going to try and bring you guys some really good content and really make this more about community and really connecting with you guys on a different level versus just doing vlogs. For the past, 3 years of me doing this vlog, I think it's been about maybe 3, but there's been a lot that has been going on through the progression with my big wave surfing to eventually competing in big waves, in big wave competitions. But, it's really exciting now to come to you guys and talk to you in a podcast and just share all the experiences, and even, like I said, bringing in some big wave talent and, really talk story about what it takes and, the things that we face as big wave surfers. And so, one thing that I really wanted to share with you guys and really touch on a lot of key issues when it comes to really talking about fear, because that is the number one thing that a lot of us go through in everyday life, especially when it comes to doing something more extreme. And fear is very relatable to a lot of things in life, and it's just something that we just really deal with and face on an everyday basis, depending on what we're doing. And I really wanted to touch base with that. And one thing that you have to understand is that when it comes to fear and the things that I've been been faced with when it comes to facing these 20 to 40 foot waves, is you really have to stop judging yourself when it comes to when experiencing for anxiety and fear. And in fact, if you really don't experience any of these symptoms, then there's pretty much something wrong with you. You're just a crazy nutball, because it's just something that we all go through. And once you really understand to learn and to accept the motion or the symptom, you can really make them an ally versus an enemy. And this is just the things that I've been working with and that I've been doing. And, in general, fear and anxiety are normal emotions and symptoms that we all face, no matter who we are. There's two types of individuals that experience these things, right? You have your theorist and your practitioner. So what I mean by that is I kind of consider myself both, because not only am I a practitioner of going through these emotions of fear and anxiety, I just feel that as a theorist as well, like I'm writing down these emotions and these feelings and journaling and trying to figure out different ways on how to handle them and how to face them. And there's some pretty good individuals too that you can look up, and I will mention them in a bit. But, a theorist is someone that studies the idea, that explains why and how something works. And then when you look at a practitioner is someone who is actively doing the work. So, sometimes it's always, when you look at a theorist, all they're doing is just going based off a theory. And that's more of like your book, like book ethics and whatnot when it comes to these understanding emotions. I feel like the best people are the practitioners, someone like myself that understands what fear feels like, and the anxiety that we feel when we're faced with these situations, or if we put ourselves in these situations. And so, there's actually really two good theorists that I would recommend on looking up. One is Joseph Ledoux, who is a neuroscientist that studies the brain and the fear circuits. So look him up. He's actually got some really good, brilliant ideas that he shares in general that I feel that you can benefit from, because, like I said, he's not only studying it in a neurological way and doing studies on different individuals, but he has these cases, these studies, and I believe he's done some pretty impressive work. So I definitely say look him up. And then there is another gentleman by the name of Dr. Roseman. Roseman is a Harvard medical professor and founder of the Center of Anxiety. So he does a lot of these tests and obviously studies when it comes to feeling about the anxiety or maybe even fear, because both fear and anxiety are very, very similar. You both experience the heart race, you both experience the cotton mouth, and they're just, what's different about them is how you face each one. Like, for instance, like I could use this as an example, right? Like, anxiety is more of like a feeling of doom and gloom. So like, let's just say if you've done any sort of, and I'm not saying to do this or anything like that, but think about if you've drank and you've had a hangover and you wake up late at night and you have that anxiety. That is completely different than fear. That is just more of doom and gloom, where you're experiencing a high heart rate, and sometimes you might think that you're going to die or whatever it may be, but that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is obviously some sort of stress as well, because whenever you're stressed, you're feeling that anxiety, you're having that antsiness of wanting to crawl out of your skin, or you need to move because your anxiety levels are high. And so one thing that we have to realize is that as a practitioner, we have to dig deep on where and why fear and anxiety exist. Okay? Fear and anxiety are written in our DNA, and it's basically passed down from past trauma or programmed based off of whether it is a past or someone else's fear and anxieties that has gone off on you. What I believe, and even when you look like just from a gene standpoint, meaning our family genetics and everything like that, is that I believe that we inherit our generation stressors, especially when we first start off in the womb. And so this just goes back to what I was just saying. So for an example, like, think of when we were in our mother's womb, when she would feel these emotions or symptoms, like that dopamine is released into her bloodstream, feeding into ours. So automatically, like when we are in the womb, we're going to be feeling, or at least getting that dopamine release. So whenever we're in the womb and something happens to our mom, or an existing mom that is carrying a child in the womb, is that baby is going to be experiencing what you're experiencing. They're going to be experiencing the high heart rate. if you're scared, they're going to be scared. There's like, it's so interesting to think on how we connect in that aspect, because we're literally joined by them, especially when we're thinking about the umbilical cord, right? So I don't want to get like too nerdy about it, but when you think about like how we're connected in that way, we're going to be feeling those. And then eventually that is going to be inherited to us and within the bloodline. So fear is your body's natural governor that is designed to protect you, that basically activates your central nervous system. So fear is a good thing, because happiness and fear are also very similar in a way. It just, the only thing is how you gotta look at it is how you reverse it. And it's one of the things that I've been experiencing and the things that I've been going through is that I've been trying to, master how to handle the fear, okay? Because no matter what, fear is always going to be around. Like no matter how many times you're faced with it, you're going to get those emotions. It's just natural. However, each time that you face it, you become more immune to it, and you know how to handle and go through the situation or the feeling of that time. What's very interesting, and this is a fun fact that I wanted to share with you guys, is that did you know that fear appears roughly 500 times in the Bible? This is the very, very first biblical record of conceptual fear was by Adam. And this is when Eve took the bite of the apple and they knew that what they did was wrong. And when God confronted Adam, they hid. And the first thing that God asked them was, "Why are you hiding?" And the very first thing that Adam said to God was that he was afraid. And that is in Genesis 3:10. What's also very interesting too is that the Bible doesn't hide fear. It records its honesty within the kings, the warriors, the prophets, and the leaders all share the experiences with fear. Now, I'm not trying to make this into a Bible study or anything for that matter, but the Bible is one of the oldest books. Actually, it is the oldest book. But when you look at what all of these great men and warriors and prophets of what they have had to go through, they experienced fear. And so when you read these scriptures of where this fear is based and how they feel and what they've been faced, it really puts things into perspective. Is it just imagine about how when Christ was put on the cross, and you bet he was afraid. Even though he knew what it was his job to die for our sin. But he cried out, "Why did you forsake me?" And then obviously that's when he went to the heavens. But I don't want to get too in depth in that. But when I look at that in a perspective, is just like, wow, here it is, a man that he knew his message and what he was going to do. He put everything on the line and he was afraid, but he still faced it and he did what he had to do. And so the one thing is how do you handle the fear and the anxiety? One thing is that you have to face it and you have to acknowledge it. Acknowledging actually reduces the intensity of fear, right? Fear wants to be recognized, not ignored. The moment that you start facing that fear, you are becoming stronger in knowing how to walk through it. For me, right, it's not like when I'm out on those days when like me and Christian are together and it's bombing at wherever we're surfing, or if I'm over in Hawaii somewhere, or if I'm in South America or wherever the waves are big and I'm there, I've been trying to understand on how to be a better practitioner when it comes to that. And I think if anything, what happens for me is that I get more into my head than fear-based, because when I'm more in my head, it's more of second guessing. I'm starting to second doubt all of the things that I've done. to prepare me to be in that moment. However, when that goes on and on and on, then eventually fear becomes gnarlier and stronger, and then you start really truly second guessing yourself, and by that time it is no fun whatsoever, because then at that point you're so into your head that you just basically just give up. You just shut off because your central nervous system is activated for so long that there's only so much of that dopamine that the body can handle to where you get tired. Have you ever had those moments to where when you had a lot of anxiety, you became super tired and you were basically almost like at a point of relax, like where you were relaxed because you just eventually gave up and you found some sort of peace? Fear is never going to go away. It's just a matter of knowing how to handle it and battle through it. Here's another fun fact. When I'm faced with fear, I'm just speaking about me, is that when I'm faced with fear, I think of it as my inner crowd cheering for me. So that's the number one thing that I always do, is I always think about a big crowd that is cheering for me. And since I do that, that works. And to basically go with what I'm faced at that current time. So when I'm faced with something in that current time, I'm replaying my mind that like I have a million people watching me and they're cheering me on. And that's when I go. That's when I'm like, I remember when I was doing the contest over at Pico Alto, that was by far the biggest I've surfed so far, and being a part of the best big wave, one of the best big wave contests in the world. And so when I was facing that situation of, of some 40-foot, it was roughly about a 15-foot swell, which I'm assuming that there had to have been at least close to some 18-footers. So we're looking anywhere between 35 to almost 40 feet, and it was at 16 seconds. And so I remember the anxiety and the fear that I was facing before I went out. I had to do everything in my power to control all of that anxiety and that fear that I had. One, I was super excited to be there. I was taking everything in that was around me, just the experience and being in a competition, because that was the first competition I've done in years. And then to be in that element with my friends and my wife, it gave me like a form of just adrenaline of being, like I was David facing Goliath and going upon to slay the giant. And when I eventually went out to the lineup, when the safety ski came and got me and took me to the lineup with everybody, that's when everything hit me, where I was in an oh shit moment. We are like, it's real. We're here. Everything that I've put in, all the work that I've put in, all the training, all the surfing, everything, it's real. And I couldn't even fathom on the feeling of fear, because I think at that point, like I had no fear. Like I had a game plan and I stuck with that game plan. And I just think that's one of the things that we have to do, is that when we're faced with fear, we have to have a game plan by having like this moment of where we're psyching the mind in a different way, to where we're taking the mind away from that fear. And so when I did that, is that I had a calm body, I had a calm mind, I had a strategic game plan on how I was going to compete. And when I did that, I did not have 1 ounce of fear. And fear starts in your nervous system, and before it hits your thoughts, if you calm the body, the mind will follow. So remember that. You have to calm the body and the mind will follow. And I think that this just goes back to what I was just saying a few seconds ago, is that I was literally in a point of where I was super calm, super relaxed, to where fear didn't take its control on like how it normally does sometimes when I free surf. It's just been so trippy since that experience. And even coming into this whole entire past winter that just passed, there was a couple days where it wasn't super big, but I kind of let fear override myself. Like it was information overload. And I had to keep on telling myself, Chris, like, you've been in conditions that are bigger than this. Like, why are you tripping out? And I just think a lot of it too is that my mindset was in a different place at that time. I think a lot of it was my main focus was that I wanted to be prepared for being a water safety technician for Christian and for everyone else that was in the water during that time. And I think once I'm just saying for me as an individual, I feel is that once I set my mind to something, I'm kind of set in that way. And so my whole main focus wasn't so much of catching the biggest wave this winter. It was more of like, okay, let me get safety down to where when we're put in bad situations, I know how to react. I'm not going to second guess anything. I'm going to go with just primal instinct and what I've been trained to do. And I think what happened is when I was put out of that situation and put into a different arena by surfing and, trying to catch a big wave or whatever it is, that it put me in a different mind frame, and it just kind of threw me off to where I was somewhat off kilter. I was off frequency. I never got into that flow state. And so that is another thing. And that just comes into the mindset, is that it's just all in the matter of being in that flow state of not having fear take over you. Right. And so you really have to scenario play when it comes to those emotions of fear and anxiety. You have to say to yourself, am I in danger in this current moment, or am I imagining on what's going to happen in the future? One thing that we all have to understand is that we have no control over what happens in the future. All we do is have control of the present. That's why when you're faced with fear or an anxiety moment, you have to talk about the current situation and face it and talk yourself through it strategically. And, that's what I do. And I feel like that is the one thing that really, really helps is to decide whether fear is a proactive, which is useful, or is it spiraling, which is draining, which I was explaining earlier about when you have those anxieties to where it drains you, you're tired. Also, focusing on what you can control, like I was saying earlier, is that fear can get overwhelming when you focus on everything all at once. I feel that you sometimes have to you have to individually put these areas in different roads of how you can handle that fear in that situation. You have to shift focus. You have to think about your preparation, obviously the next step, and the decisions on the actions that you base everything off of. And remember, when you're in control, that creates such clarity. And, I'm going to use this whole entire example too of when I was at Pico Alto, is that I was in complete control. And that's why I had clarity. I knew that I was there for a purpose. I knew that I was there for a reason. And I stuck to the game plan. And I just feel that a lot of us don't have game plans. We just go into that moment with just pure action, which is great, because without action, there's no reaction, and without reaction, there's no action. And so when you are acting and you're playing into what you're trying to achieve, whether you have fear or anxiety, it's just all on how you work through it. And I would really, really, really love to hear what you guys go through and what you've experienced. So in the comments below, please share to me about what it is that whenever you're faced with fear and anxiety, like, what do you do? How do you walk through these situations if you're, obviously I'm speaking to people that surf big waves, or someone that or some people that think they're surfing big waves, because everyone has different experiences. People have different, skill levels, or even in competition in general. I mean, I remember, constantly when I was really in depth in competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no matter how much I trained, I remember the moment that I had to go into competition mode, is that I would always have that. If anything, it was more anxiety than fear. I wasn't scared at all. But I remember the anxiety that I would feel every single time when I had to go into the octagon to compete against someone else that I didn't know like how much training they did. I didn't know if they were sandbagged and they should be like a blue or purple belt, but their professor kept them lower because they wanted to get more points when it comes to their team so they can, have a higher role, which does happen in competition in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I trained with the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu team known as Checkmat. So my professor was Lucas Leite, who is he is the half guard king. And, I remember so many times of like not only working with him, but Marcus Buchecha. The list goes on of, I can't think of all their names because it's been a while since I've been in the whole entire realm of competition, but like Leo Vieira and Luis Panza, these guys are all some of the best Brazilian practitioners in the world. And, working with them gave me such a different perspective to where when I was going into battle, I never had fear. I had more anxiety than fear. For some reason with surfing, when I'm facing 20 to 40 footers, I get a lot of fear, and rightfully so, right? But handling fear is less about giant leaps and more about what's the next right step. So think about that. You have to reframe fear as information, and fear often means a few things. Fear means that something matters. There's purpose, right? So think about if you're maybe someone that's trying to do an Ironman, or someone that is doing something way, way, way more out of their comfort zone. You're doing something for the purpose. So there is always going to have some fear factor into that. You also have to think about you're growing in a different perspective. You're also stepping outside of the comfort zone. So fear brings a lot of good things. Like it brings breakthrough, but it could also set you back if you let that fear take over you. So what you have to do is, instead of, think about this, fear, some people think that fear means stop. And it all depends on what you're doing. And I feel that sometimes with fear is that there's different types of fear. There's the fear of, obviously, that something is going to go wrong, but fear is also to where it means for you to stop, to where you get so scared, you pause, everything that you've learned, everything that you've trained for it's completely gone. And your mind and body is such on an information overload that it just wants to stop. Okay. So what you have to do is try this. Okay. And what I mean by this is fear means pay attention and go for it. Whenever, and this is a firm believer, I'm a firm believer, is that fear brings huge, mega breakthrough. And I'm going to use this as an example. My good friend Christian, love him to death. I have never seen anyone so far that I've been close with when it comes to putting ourselves on the line and going over the ledge. He was in a state of flow, and there was just something that clicked with him that to where he passed that thing of fear that held him back before. And so to see someone break through that, and to see the breakthrough, to submit for a competition, then get to and be an invitee to compete in the Thriller at Killers contest. And what's very interesting about that is that he got to compete against some of the best surfers in the world. Grant Twiggy Baker, Jojo Roper, Nick Lamb. I mean, these are all top guys that are big wave surfers. But there was just something that clicked with him when it came to fear and anxiety, because there was so many times that we would talk and we would try and work through each other. Like, we would help each other try to, work through it. And to see him go through that and to get past that, that is what it's about, is getting into that flow state of being put on that next level. And so you really just have to take those small steps and just not get into your head. And what's interesting about that too is that you have to anchor to something that's bigger than yourself. Find an anchor or a purpose, whether it is your faith, whether it is your purpose, whether it is the values that you have, or the responsibility that you have to others as a parent or as a husband or wife. As things go on, fear will get smaller and the why gets bigger. And that's just one thing that has just been so amazing about this whole entire journey of trying to figure out how to break through that. And it's just been a great whole entire journey of being faced with fear and understanding how to walk through it, because it hasn't been easy. It's been hard. And if anything, the voices do get a little less. But what's going to make us a better practitioner is the consistency of being in those emotions to where we know how to work through it. Because at the end of the day, you could do all the preparation, you could do all the training to where you feel good, you feel confident, but there's just this side that sometimes it becomes overwhelming. And I know a lot of you I know that this resonates with a lot of people. However, everyone has different ways on how they manage through it. And I just really wanted to share this emotion with you guys in this topic, because as a surfer and as a father, and not only that, like, it was just it's my birthday today, and I really got to really think about a lot of things about how fear is. I mean, think about this. Like, I'm almost at that point where I'm almost at that 50-year mark of where I'm halfway between my life cycle. Each year, as I go through this life cycle, or as we go through that life cycle in life, each time we're faced with it, we're looking at things in a whole new perspective. We're seeing friends pass away. We're seeing a lot of relatives pass away. We're seeing friends and relatives being faced with certain types of diseases. And a lot of those things bring fear. A lot of those things bring anxiety, and it makes you think about, we're limited by time, and you really have to go after the things that make you feel alive and that give you purpose. And when you find those things and you're faced with that, you're gonna face these emotions, these of triggering that central nervous system and just going through that. And just think about this. The only way that you're ever gonna have that breakthrough is when you go over it, when you go over that ledge, whenever you are faced and you go beyond that point. Because with every new level, you're faced with a new devil. And it's so neat to experience these emotions, because we only have a short period of time to experience this, because eventually our chapter will end, our book will end, and with whatever we do, we're going to leave some sort of legacy to our children, to our relatives, to our friends, to the world. And for me, it's not so much about competing with people. I want to try and leave some sort of legacy to where I can make my son and my grandson proud. And it's just been so great just to go through life and experience these emotions that we go through, and understanding of how we can master the mindset. And that's just the thing, my friends, is try to master that mindset and go after the things that matter to you most. Give it your all. Face that fear. You're going to lose sometimes. That fear is going to get you sometimes. But as long as you're putting yourself out in that arena, you're already becoming 10 steps ahead of your overall goal and purpose of what you want to do. So I just want to share this with you guys and, have you guys think and push yourselves in a whole new way. I'm so fired up just about life and about what is going to happen in the future and what my big wave somewhat career can look like, especially with my business, with, helping other people surf and coaching people. And it's really exciting. And even owning that, a business is very fearful and a lot of anxiety. And, but I'm just so thankful that I got to share this moment with you guys and just hopefully give you some sort of tool to where you can learn how to walk through something. Maybe I didn't make sense. Maybe I did. Who knows? This is the first time I've done a solo podcast. And if you guys liked it, please give a thumbs up. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe. I'm going to try and start producing more actual vlogs now, especially with summer here, and there hasn't really been much waves either. We're kind of in a weird funk where we're kind of like in that where we're still kind of experiencing some winter symptoms, like with cold and a lot of south and west wind, eddy wind. So there hasn't really been that many good waves. We've only had like one good swell, and that was back in like mid-March. Or April, I think. It was one of the two. I can't remember, but wedge was pretty good. So stay tuned. I'm going to try and push out a new podcast next week. Thank you so much for tuning in the Stoke Nation podcast. Like I said, subscribe, watch more videos, subscribe to the podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you for listening to my rant, or if I'm connecting with you guys, amazing. So see you guys on the next one. Aloha.